Hi everyone, today I'm doing another 10 looks 1 palette series using my Natasha Denona Sunset Palette. If you're new to my channel, this is basically a series where I take one palette and try and create 10 different unique looks as a way to challenge myself and give inspiration for those of you that have the palette or maybe a palette with similar shades in here. I decided to choose this one because it's recently come back in stock because it is now permanent, and also because, you know, there are a lot of palettes that have come out with similar shades. The ColourPop Yes Please palette is one that comes to mind. Anyway, I usually do this in 2 parts, the first being the more wearable, conservative looks, the second being the more dramatic, but it didn't really go to plan. They all kind of turned out quite, I guess, you know, intense, like this one here. And I think that's just because there are a lot of really vibrant, beautiful colors in here. So I kind of just went with it. This one I'm going to do 5 looks, and the next part I'll do another 5, just because this generally takes up a lot of time, so it's, you know, easier to split it up in 2. Anyway, if you want to see the 5 looks I've created, then just keep watching. So this is the first look I've created with this palette, and I've basically just used the shades that my eyes automatically gravitate towards. Firstly, I'm using my Concrete Minerals Electric Eye Primer, which I always use to prime my eyelids. Then I'm going in with the shade Soul, which is that bright matte yellow shade, and I haven't put anything as a base to brighten it, such as, you know, a concealer or a white base, just because I want to see how pigmented it is going on my lids, and it is quite pigmented, and I'm very impressed with that because a lot of yellows don't actually show up on the lids this bright unless you've got it on top of a base. Anyway, I'm just sweeping this color along my mobile lid using this new brush I got from Spectrum, and I actually quite like it. I think it's really effective for packing the color on. Then I'm going to blend it all out using another new brush from Real Techniques, which is the Powder Blur brush, which is supposed to mimic blue squirrel hair, which, by the way, it doesn't. And I'm going in with the shade Terra, which in the pan it looks like a brown shade and it is described as mahogany, but it actually looks really orange on my eyelids, which is surprising. Anyway, I'm putting that into my crease pretty liberally, as well as the outer V, and just kind of blending it outwards and into a wing shape. I'm just blending it out to diffuse any of the harsh edges. As you can see, a little does really go a long way with these shades, so you know, you do need to be a little bit light-handed, otherwise you can go quite overboard. Next, I'm going to take that lovely deep red shade and concentrate that between Soul, the yellow shade, and Terra, which is that orangey, so-called mahogany shade. And I'm going in with a detailed pencil brush because I don't have a whole lot of lid space. So I find that this brush is particularly good for getting into those really precise little areas. I'm just blending it all in together so it creates more of a gradient effect. I'm taking Terra again and just building that up in the crease area, taking it into the inner eye as well, and also more of that yellow shade just to build up the vibrancy. I'm taking Igneous, which is the darkest brown in this palette, and just lining my lower lash line using another new brush from Spectrum, which is actually for brows, so I wouldn't recommend this for lower lashes because it is quite scratchy and harsh on this sensitive area. Then I'm going to grunge it up a bit with that orange shade Horizon, and this shade actually goes on lighter than I expected. I would describe it as more of a mid-tone orange. Anyway, I'm just smoking out my lower lash line as well as connecting it up to the outer V and defining the wing shape. And again, I'm just giving everything a bit of a blend. And this is the final look. I would say that this look is kind of like the epitome of the Sunset palette in my opinion. Next look is this more wearable smoky eye. This is probably the most conservative look I've created from this palette so far. First, I'm taking Bermuda, which is a matte peach shade, and pretty much putting that all over my eyelid. These mattes are really nice to work with. They blend out really easily. There's pretty much no fallout, and they apply really smoothly without emphasizing any texture on my eyelid. Then I'm just shearing everything out with a clean blending brush. Next, I'm taking this copper shade, which is Atmosphere 120M. M stands for metallic, and this is more of a satin sheen rather than a full metallic. Her more intense metallic formula is the one that ends in K, which stands for chroma crystals. Anyway, I'm putting that all over my mobile lid and also sort of winging it out slightly. Just following the shape that flatters your eye, basically. Then I'm taking the shade Volcano on the outer V, and this is a matte brown with warm undertones. I'm just kind of smoking it out. So you may have noticed that all 3 shades I've used so far are from the first column. I know some people like their palettes from lightest to darkest, but Natasha Denona tends to put her shades by pairing. So first column, you know, it can be a look, first row can be a look, diagonally, all that sort of stuff, just as a guide, which I think can sometimes be helpful in trying to figure out which shades go together or work best together. Then I'm going to blend out the edges around the outer V. As you can see, these shadows are pretty easy to blend, but they don't lose their intensity either, and they don't just fade out to nothing. With Volcano, I'm going to line my lower lash line as well, because this is what I do every day just to give it more definition, and I do prefer using a brown over black because it looks more natural. Then I'm taking that red shade Panjin, which I believe is named after the red beach in China, and I'm just placing that on my eyelid as a sort of accent color just to make it a little bit more interesting. I'm going to give everything a quick blend and then going back in with Atmosphere just to soften up the lash line. So I really like how this has turned out, and I especially like that this was pretty quick and simple. So this pumpkin spice look is not too dissimilar from what I did with Queen of Hearts palette, but this is like the more intense version. So first I'm taking the shade Sinai, which is described as a burnt terracotta shade, and placing that on the outer corners of my eyes because I'm going to create a halo eye. And yes, I know this brush looks really dirty and it does need to be cleaned, but I have used my Vera Mona color switch to get any of that excess pigment out. Then I'm also going to concentrate it on the inner portion of my eye, leaving the center of my lid bare. And then I'm just going to blend everything out a little so there are no harsh lines. And then I'm adding Pixie Epoxy, which is a base to make shimmer shades pop, because I'm going to add Mandarin on the center, and this is a duochrome orange with a gold shift. It's very vibrant when applied on top of a base. You don't need to add a base to these to make them really shine or wet your brush, but I do want to see how intense it can look with the base. I'm going back in with Cyanide to further define the halo shape. Next, I'm taking Volcano and putting that on the outer V just to give it some dimension using the same brush so I can avoid doing too much washing up. And I'm doing circular motions, sort of buffing it in with Mandarin so that the 2 shades kind of mesh together. I'm taking Ice Gold, which is a chroma crystal finish, although I would disagree, this has more of a metallic finish, and I'm placing that on my brow bone. Again, I'm taking Cyanide and running that along the lower lash line just to kind of smoke it out. I'm using Volcano, which is the matte brown shade, to define my lower lash line. Personally, I like to take my liner from the outer edge to 3/4 of the way in, not quite reaching the tear duct. Again, I'm taking Ice Gold as my inner corner highlight. I personally would have preferred this to be substituted with a cream matte shade because I don't really like this shade. I think it's not very pigmented, it's not very foiled, and it's just not unique. I'm just keeping everything quite fresh, especially when I have an intense eye, and if I'm having a good skin day, I don't always like to wear foundation. Just a little bit of concealer where I need it. So this is the final look. I love the color combination here, and the halo eye shape just makes the eyes look bigger. This is another variation of a sunset look. I would say this is more of a conservative version of the first one I did. So first I'm going to take Sol, which is the matte yellow shade, and place that into my crease. Fun fact, Sol is Latin for sun, and I have noticed that each shade in here relates in some way to its color or to the theme of a sunset, which I think is kind of cool. Then I'm taking the matte orange shade Horizon as a transition shade, and I'm using a very tapered brush because I want to be very precise with my placement. That's pretty much the great thing about this brush, but on the downside, because there is such a small surface area and because it can't deposit that much pigment, you do need to build it up when using this brush, which is what I'm doing here. With the shade Igneous, I'm taking that on the mobile lid and just keeping it close to the lash line. What I'm trying to do here is create a horizontal ombre with the darkest shade closer to the eye and then lightest closer to the brow bone. Then I'm going to go back in with the matte yellow shade just to build up the intensity because sometimes it kind of just gets lost in between the blending. I'm also going to add more of the orange shade, which I use as my transition, and add it to the lower lash line as well. I'm taking Igneous and defining my lower lash line, taking it 3/4 of the way in, and also connecting it to where I put it on my mobile lid. Next, I'm going to line my upper lash line using this black liquid liner, and I'm going to wing it out slightly. I'm not going to show you the whole process because it usually takes a long time for me. I'm taking this golden shade Sundays, which is a chroma crystal finish, and I'm using that as my inner corner highlight. Using a natural hair brush, I would not advise doing that because it does get just everywhere. It is nice, however, on the cheeks that I don't mind fallout there, but when it gets in my eyes, it's not pleasant. So I think this would look actually much nicer with lashes, false lashes, but I didn't really have time. My window of opportunity to film is very short these days. So the last look is one inspired by the fact that I hadn't used the shade Morgana in this entire palette, and it's beautiful. So here I'm taking the shade Bronzage, which is a copper shade, and placing that all over the mobile lid using a synthetic brush. By the way, I am applying this shade with a dry brush. I haven't wet it or anything, and I am pretty happy with the color payoff. Then I'm taking the shade Morgana on the outer V, and this is a really beautiful shade. It's quite unique to my collection. It's a duochrome with a red base and a golden shift. It doesn't look anything special in the pan, which is probably why I didn't use it earlier. Then I'm going in with a clean fluffy brush and blending it upwards and outwards. I think the red looks really cool contrasted against the copper shades, so I'm just adding Panjin and just intensifying the outer V as well as taking it into my crease. And I'm just blending everything out because I don't want it to look like a super harsh cut crease. With the same brush and that same shade, I'm just going to smoke out my lower lash line. And then I'm running a clean blending brush along the edges. I'm going to create a liner by mixing Inglot Duraline with some of the brown matte shade. And with a liner brush, I'm just starting to line my upper lash line. This is by no means going to be a natural look, so it doesn't matter if it's thick or anything like that. I'm not trying to be super precise. Since I've already got a bit of a wing shape with my eyeshadow, I am going to create a wing with the liner as well. Then I'm going to line my lower lash line, taking it 3/4 of the way in and also connecting it up to the wing. And then lastly, I'm going to use Bronzage for my inner corner highlight. Do not use a natural hair brush like this one. Use a synthetic brush like this one because you get a much better color payoff. So this is the final look using Morgana as the star of the eye look. I would say this is hands down my favorite shade from the palette. So those were the 5 looks I've created with the Sunset palette. I hope you found this useful and I hope it's given you some ideas on how you can use this. Let me know what your favorite look was in the comments below and what color combinations you like with these sort of shades. Hopefully I'll get part 2 up soon, but if you haven't already, please subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss it if you want to see it. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.